Okay. So do you have any questions from your discussions, or any questions that have popped up in your dreams or over lunch or whatever? Open the windows. Can we open the windows? Open the curtains.
No.
Let the light in.
Well, you will not be able to
I
be
don't
seen.
care, whatever. Anyway, whatever. Okay. Okay, any questions, anybody? Any questions? Yes, Pam?
It's not a question so much as could we be given that practice you mentioned of going to sleep and going through the 8 stages of death as a practice?
Of course, people who learn, who study it, do that, yes, of course.
I mean, it wouldn't be for us.
Anybody who wants to give it a go, why not? It's in this book that's coming out. A couple of weeks will be available. It's there. Yeah, absolutely.
Because I picked this practice sort of off the internet a couple of years ago. I don't know, I can't remember by whom anyway. It was sort of becoming like imagining that you're not going to wake up the following morning.
I see.
Before you go to sleep.
Sure.
And I never remember sleeping so deeply in my life.
Oh.
After doing it for, I don't know, half an hour or...
I see. What was the point of it? What was the goal of the meditation?
To the concept of death, and that it's not unlike dreaming and
I see.
up.
Okay, good. All right. Okay, yeah, good, sure, absolutely. So, anybody, what else? Anything?
I don't know if you're going to go again to it. I still have problems understanding the emptiness.
Oh, well, of course you do, darling. God Almighty. And like I said, they study for 30 years and meditate for 30 years. And there's no question, of course, of course, of course. So let's talk more about that from different perspectives, okay? Just to get as long as you get a general sense of the implication of it, the meaning of it, the behind it, where that's taking you. This is what's most important. Then we can slowly learn it, you know? So the bottom line for the Buddha, like I'm saying, all the teachings will lead us to this one. When you like you study in the monasteries, all the system of the studies are all kind of preparing your mind. But it's like any course you study, isn't it? If you're studying music, you learn all the basics first. Then it leads you to the more advanced stuff. And this is why, especially the Tibetans, are very excellent at packaging all the teachings in this kind of way, structured according to your capacity. So all the teachings, all the wisdom teachings, all the compassion, all leading to this one. Understanding the mind, how it works, the delusions, the way they function, all of this stuff. So the whole point about the emptiness one, the point behind teachers, Buddha's view of how the self actually exists. He says the words, which means that are quite abstract to us, that our frantic, instinctive, primordial clinging to and belief in, this is the words for it, okay? Real, solid, definite, real little me in there, which gives rise to enormous craving and attachment to get what that assumed I wants, which gives rise to panic attacks and anger and loss and aversion and rage and despair and anger and violence when it doesn't, which gives rise to the other delusions. So they've all got this deep relationship, these deluded states of mind. Do you understand? So we recognise anger, we recognise pride, we recognise low self-esteem. We might not recognise ego grasping. You get my point here. But that, the Buddha would say, is the root of it. Do you see? So not having that, then attachment and anger and jealousy and all the other neuroses would crumble into a heap of nothingness. So that's his particular view psychologically of how the mind works, okay? So we then need to, then first level of practice, control your body and speech, and don't go around killing and lying and stealing. Then you start to calm your energy down. Then you start to become your own therapist and start to become very familiar with all the day-to-day delusions, which are the branches, if you like, of this root delusion. And then eventually you're able to get to the very subtler level and to begin to see how that one even works. Do you understand? So in general, though, the Buddha's view is the more solid and the function of this ego grasping in daily life, if you've got a really strong, powerful ego grasping, it means your attachment is very strong, which means you have very strong anger when it doesn't go what it wants. So if you look at the world, it's like there it is. The manifestation of these neuroses. The world's behaviour is the indication, using the Buddha's view, of these neuroses that we have, you know. And the root of them is this clinging to a separate, bereft, lonely, fear-based sense of an I. So, but we do that to everything. So using a simple example like, you know, okay, Buddha's saying, one of the implications of believing that everything, not just the I, but everything, and this is the words for it, which we don't get, exists inherently. That everything is solid, independent, this or that. Not independent, very strongly this or that. One of the functions of this ego grasping is that everything's very concrete. So if you have a person who's really, one of the consequences of this ignorance, as an ordinary person, will be really fundamentalist, I'm right, you're wrong. There's no concept in that person's mind that there's any flexibility. They can see things from another point of view, that maybe you're really right after all, perhaps I'm wrong myself. One of the classic consequences of very strong ego grasping is this complete concrete fundamentalist. This is how it is, and this is this. And this, Buddha says, is what is the basis of all of our suffering. We've all got this to varying degrees. And therefore, to the extent to which we suffer. So it's sort of one approach to saying letting go of ego grasping is to kind of loosen the grip a little bit and begin to get a bit flexible. So even, one of the ways of talking about emptiness would be, for example, if things did exist in the way that ego thinks they do, which is very absolute and concrete, then things wouldn't ever change. Things would be paralysed in space. But it's clear, no matter what exists, one of the things is no matter what exists, we can change the way we see it. That proves it's not frozen in space, which is the opposite to emptiness. Emptiness is implying that things are interdependent, that things have causes, that things can be seen this way, things can be seen that way, that things are flexible and changeable. They're not set in stone, So, for example, prison. I have many friends in prison practicing Buddhism and who have learned to be happy. So if you want to take a typical, like we discussed before, you state there's a person here, you state there's a cup, you label it, you define it, and it is that, and then we can discuss how it exists. So clearly we can say, what is prison, mummy? Well, prison, darling, is an ugly house where you're sent when you're naughty and you can't get out. I mean, that's a definition of prison, that'll do. And it's horrible, and the people shout and yell, and it's awful, and you're a naughty person. So you're seen as the lowest of lowest. Prison, in other words, if you saw an advertisement in the real estate pages, there's a free rent in a prison, I don't think we'd want to go. Because we all know the meaning of prison. It's an ugly place, You don't want to go there. You don't want to live there, because conventionally, prison is awful. Conventionally, getting $1,000 in the bank is nice. Conventionally. We know the good things and the bad things. Conventionally, a punch on the nose is awful. Conventionally, a kiss is nice. Conventionally, having money stolen is not cool. Conventionally, being given money is nice. This is conventions of the world. They're conventions. They're things we agree upon. So the Buddha is saying this. They are those things, but what we do is we impose upon them some absolute concrete reality. And that's what causes us to have all the dramas. This is right, that's wrong. There's no space, So when we have that view about ourself, we're like stuck, it's frozen in space, neurotic, fearful, miserable, raging, fear, bears, anger, attachment, like a nightmare. You'll have nightmare relationships. Look at the world. If your mind's more flexible, it means you can see things, it's a very profound way to put it. One of the implications of understanding emptiness, quote unquote, is you can see things from other points of view. It means you can change your mind. I mean, like, wow, So if things did exist in the way Buddha says our delusions think they do, then the world would be... Things couldn't exist this way, because everything is interdependent. Things do change from moment to moment. Things aren't set in stone. So, for example, then, one of my friends in prison, forget that woman, but even some of the people I know, he's decided that this is his home. He can't leave it, so you might as well not think, I wish I had a home. You always be miserable. So this is his home. He's decided it's my home. I'm going home now, he says. When I've had a meeting with him in the chapel, no, bye, I'm going home. It's my home. Instead of, I'm going to my cell. I'm so miserable, I'm in ugly prison. Which is how we are, So as soon as attachment doesn't get what it wants, which is called, that gives rise to anger, then we assume that thing is bad. The boyfriend is bad.
Could you repeat that, Robina?
Which bit?
That bit that you just said now, the sentence, I didn't get that.
Oh dear. Okay. On the one side, Buddha's saying things do have a clear status as being this or that. We all have to be clear. 1 plus 1 is 2 every time. A cup is a cup. It's not a toilet, you know. Well, you can be flexible, I suppose. A small toilet. You know, a knife is something that cuts something. A microphone amplifies sound. So we can get this conventional reality and label, name, define, and then everything works beautifully. We can communicate. So what he's saying is, though, as soon as we hear that, we then kind of try to freeze it in space and say it's absolutely that, which means you can never change your thought about it, which we make it paralyzed. That's what this ego grasping does. So you are a self, you are Prem, you are a person, and then immediately kind of freeze it in space. I am this. Look at ego. Look how we are when we're miserable. I am hopeless. I am no good. 72 people can tell you you're really a nice person, but if you're convinced you're a creep, nothing will change your mind. Because this is the irony of ego. It runs to the bad side. It's addicted to the misery. I'm hopeless. I'm no good. That's exactly the way believing in an independent inherent me. The word of saying we believe in an independent inherent me sounds like a joke. What do you mean, mate? You know, what's that mean? But the implication of that is that it's this, I am this is this, and there's never any flexibility. So then we think that nothing has an inherent nature. Everything is made by the mind. Nothing has an inherent nature. So then we can get a bit wishy-washy and you know, vague. Oh, well, you can do what you like. Anything's everything. No, no, no. You've got to have something that is something, but not from its own side. Something is this, but it's not from its own side. These two seem to be contradictory to us. So the implication of this...
Not from its own side.
Okay. Okay. We're jumping into the deep end here, and I'm trying to sort of keep it down to earth, you know. This is stuff that you do learn after many years in the monasteries. So, okay. Buddha's saying that ego grasping, the root delusion, thinks that I and everything else that exists, and these are the synonyms, inherently, exists intrinsically as that, exists in and of itself as that, from its own side as that. These are the synonyms. So, I mean, we can see it every day. If I'm fighting with my boyfriend, what's his name? I forget his name, my boyfriend. You know, Vasilis, right? If I'm fighting with Vasilis, is it not true? Is it not true when I'm fighting with him? He is saying one word and I'm saying another, and there's an absolute 1,000,000,000% belief that I'm right and he's wrong, isn't it? Do we recognise that when we're fighting? When the mind is raging in delusions, whatever the delusion is. You know, when you're completely convinced it's like this. You're going to say he gets home late and I get jealous. No, I know, you've been out looking at those girls. And he says, truthfully, no, I haven't been, Robina. But everything in me wants to believe he has. You think I should be going, oh, really, darling, you didn't look at girls? Oh, what a relief. I love you. But no, you did, we'll say. You kind of see what I'm saying, you know? I mean, this is the way you see the ordinary world function when it's fighting. That's the expression of this ego grasping. Concrete, solid. And then you look at the other one, which is a really powerful way ego grasping works. When the delusions are rampant, the anger, the fears, the jealousy, the depression, which are the voices of this primordial belief in the independent, existing from its own side, inherent intrinsic me-ness, you feel completely separate from everything. There's me here and this violent, horrible world, or this divine, delicious world is out there, completely separate from me. One of the consequences, they say, of realising emptiness, getting rid of the belief in the fantasy I, lessening all the neuroses and the delusions, is that you have this incredible sense of interconnectedness, interdependence with every being in the universe. Literally. So the sense of a separate self, lonely, bereft, concrete, miserable, hopeless, this is the consequence of this primordial belief in an inherent me. So learning to know it isn't like that, and practicing just being flexible in life, is a way to apply emptiness. So, you know, when Vasilis says, I didn't do it, and I notice that I'm jealous, I know I'm working on my mind, I will struggle to think, well, maybe, Robina, it's right. Maybe see it from his point of view. This is miraculous, you know. This is huge. And this is the application of the opposite of the miserable, inherent, grasping, definite, concrete, frozen in space belief we have about things. Not just the self, but everything, you know. So if prison, this book, if you would say, prison conventionally is an ugly place. You wouldn't want to go live there. It is loud, it is noisy, you are seen as a creep, it is punishment. You can't leave when you want to. All of these things are true, tick all the boxes. But, the Buddha would say, it's not that from its own side. It's not that intrinsically. And what that means is this. If it were that intrinsically, then you could never change your mind about it. It would only ever be evil. But I know so many people who have decided it's their home, and so now they see it as good. So one of the most profound practices in the more advanced stages that we talk about are learning to see problems as good. It's a way of, like putting an atomic bomb under ego. Primordial ego and attachment are junkies for the nice things. We want to be stroked and heard nice words and nice sounds and nice smells and nice tastes. We're like junkies for it. So because you want to smash ego, which is the one that's causing all the suffering, then you learn to greet problems. As Lama Zopa says, we learn to like problems like we like ice cream. Literally interpret it differently. That's what you're doing. No, not yet, darling. That's what you're doing. That's what you're doing when you're applying the teaching of emptiness. You're trying to see it from another point of view because it's not set in stone as that. Which doesn't mean it's not still prison, which is horrible, but it's not that inherently. It's not that in its bones. The fact that you can change your mind about it proves that.
Yes.
And the Buddha is saying everything in the universe is like this. On the one side, it is that conventionally 1 + 1 is 2, but it's even that. You can never argue that 1 + 1 is not 2. But it's not set in stone. It's come from the mind. We've all agreed it's that. We've come to the conclusion it's that. We have all set up and agree it's this. So everything's kind of like illusory in the sense that, as Lama Zopa says, when you really understood that there is no I from its own side, no prison from its own side, no 1 + 1 = 2 from its own side, intrinsically, inherently, it's as if there is no 1 + 1 is 2. But there is. But what does exist is so subtle, it is as if it is an illusion. So it's a really kind of, this extraordinary tension between saying conventionally there is that, but inherently not, ultimately not. It seems like utter contradiction. And this is, they say, but it's not a contradiction. So it demands a lot of understanding and purification and work and meditation, and then slowly getting this realizations in meditation when we have our first moment of insight into the emptiness of the fantasy I we believed in since beginningless time. You know? Things like this.
Yes.
Food for thought?
Oh, definitely.
I mean, this is all. This is what everything leads to in one's practice and one's study, you know. And it's a marvelous, marvelous, marvelous kind of incredible, subtle but knowable, doable realization. But one needs to do all the work beforehand to purify, to get ready, blah blah blah, you know, and slowly going towards this.
Robina, could I ask a question?
Yes, please.
On a practical basis, throughout a day, sometimes I'm aware of my thoughts, and sometimes I'm aware that they are negative thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
What I have been doing so far is, over the past few years probably, is to sort of not pay attention anymore to the thoughts.
Good.
I will cease entertaining them.
Good, perfect. That's the point.
Before they begin to affect
Of course,
the body.
exactly. Well, before they begin to become true stories.
Yes, exactly.
That's exactly right.
Yes.
Of course, it's all part of the approach. Of course it is. And so the key to this, okay, this is the one back to being your own therapist, which leads us to see the deeper one of emptiness. So, but again, it's helpful to this. Did you finish? That's
Yes,
it?
I did.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you. So one of the things more and more we hear the thoughts. In the beginning it's like this big just noise that's there, you know. So using the Buddha's model, this very seemingly simple model of negative and positive states of mind, then we learn more and more and more slowly to not just feel the feelings that we have, because it's a bit late when it gets to the level of feeling. That usually means when it hits the body. But we're beginning to identify these thousands of roommates in there all chatting away. Because we're so used to it, there's just this noise all the time we're used to. We don't pay attention until they really start to shout, you know. But the aim is to hear them before they start to get under control, like you say. So the point is, if we can get to hear the thoughts, the ones that are always based on the unhappy I, which are the neuroses, they've always got the flavour of either, you're talking to yourself, you're either trying to convince yourself about something you did, well, I really did that well, you know, it's not fair. No, it's either got the flavour of attachment, I really want this and I really want that, if only I had this and it's not fair, I haven't got this. Or it's kind of anger, how dare they do this to me, it's not fair, I'm not like that at all. It's pride, who do you think you are, I'm not like, you know, over-exaggerating, there's low self-esteem, I'm really not good enough, blah, blah, blah. Or you're always talking to other people, telling them things, you're trying to convince other people. If you've been at work and the person didn't see the work you did properly, you spend days talking to yourself, talking in your mind, defending yourself to this person as if they're there. This is the delusions all the time. They're always sad or a bit lonely or a bit depressed or a bit jealous or a bit fearful or a bit angry. You know, and this is what's happening non-stop. These are the unhappy ones. And they don't sound very fierce sometimes, but they're always like the sense of I is the central player. I is a central player. And it's never a good feeling about I. It's never really a healthy I, or a happy I, or a joyful I, or a fulfilled I, or a positive I, or a confident I. It's always a slightly hurt I, needy I, angry I. I mean, it's kind of hard to hear it sometimes, because it's just constant. And we don't have to sit there and think, I think I'll have a thought now. No. They're running the show. And it's almost like it's another part of us, like a schizophrenic, watching. Who's this maniac in there, you know? Isn't it? A bit like that. So it's sort of like the business about there being no I, like his continuous thoughts. Where's the one who's doing the thinking? Where's the one who's doing the intending? That's the obvious question we have. So it sounds like a complete farce and a joke to say there isn't somebody running it. It sounds shocking to say this, but it's a really good exercise to try and get to see that. You see, what throws us is that we're all the time saying I. So listen to this. It's hard to hear, but Buddha's deal is whatever goes on in the mind, it's a thought. Even the subtlest ones, they finally come down to thoughts. So it's very reasonable, isn't it? If you have a thought and then you speak it out, like I say to you, I have 2 cups in my left hand. That is a thought, isn't it? And now express it. But we can see immediately, conventionally, it isn't a correct thought. You agree? So Buddha says all these delusions, the anger, the jealous, they're all incorrect thoughts. They're over-exaggerating your ugliness, they're over-exaggerating your beauty, they're over-exaggerating someone else's deliciousness, they're over-exaggerating your low self-esteem, they're always over-exaggerating something. And so the one of the I is the thought that over-exaggerates the status of your I. Literally. Literally. So naturally we're saying I all the time. So we say, for example, I have a hand. It's a completely reasonable statement. But the Buddha says when you start to search among those thoughts, thoughts should surely be accurate thoughts. And if they're accurate, you have to prove the truth. That means you have to have a thought, then you point to the thing the thought refers to. Well, I can say, so we'll do this little test. My table has a glass, a teapot, and a cup. Conventionally speaking, would you agree with this? Have a look over here. You can see with your eyes. So if I've got a thought, then I express it as words. It is really helpful that my words express my thoughts and that they are expression of truth, isn't it? Is it not helpful to be this way? Right, good. This is just talking ordinary convention. So by not confusing you and saying, so you'll say to me, well, please prove it, Robina. Let's prove it as true. Let's prove your thoughts are true, which means the thoughts that you have to be in sync with reality. I'm not talking cosmic reality here. Otherwise you're in big trouble. And this is what he's saying about all the delusions. We have one lot of thoughts, but they're not in sync with reality. And that's where the disconnect comes, and that's where the suffering is. This nightmare of the delusions, believing in things that don't exist. Before we go to this one, let's say I say, oh wow, look at that divine, delicious chocolate cake. That's a conventional truth. It might even have won the blue ribbon at the chocolate cake show, you know? It might have. So you can't say it's not even correct to say what a divine, delicious chocolate cake. But what is informed in that thought in my mind is a lie. I'm saying, what I'm really saying is, that cake out there is definitely the cause of my happiness. And when I put it in the mouth, I'll get happy. We don't think we think that, but that's what causes us to shove it in, you know. Not that hole, this hole. And then you wait for happiness, don't you? You wait for the happiness to come, and that's why you have the next mouthful, because you're so delicious, but you're not happy yet, and you have another, maybe the next one will do it. Before you know it, you've got to vomit. And what are you left with? Depression. Because the cake that attachment sees isn't the cake that exists. So there's this disconnect between my thoughts and my beliefs and reality. That's why we suffer, Buddha says. Can you hear that? Okay. So, let's prove this is true. I have a bunch of thoughts. My table has a glass, a pot, and a teapot and a cup. I will prove it to you, and if I prove it to you, I have to have a glass. I have to point to a glass that isn't the table, that isn't the teapot, and isn't the cup. It's got to be one thing, a glass, that isn't anything else there. Then I have to point to a teapot that is not a glass, not a table, not a cup. And then I have to point to a cup that is not a table, not a teapot, not a glass. And then I have to point to the table that is not a cup, a teapot, and a glass. That's reasonable, isn't it? That's laboured, but this is not that reasonable point. So I've now proven that there are 4 separate, individual, precisely labelled and defined phenomena. You agree? Yes. So we can all go, tick, you're right, Robina, the thought is in sync with reality. You agree? Okay. I have a nose and a hand and a foot. Conventionally speaking, would you agree with that as being a truth? Yes? Okay. It is going to be exactly the same exercise. If that's a true statement, conventionally, I'm going to have to find a foot, there it is, cut it off, and put it there, a foot that is not a hand, and is not a nose, and is not an eye. Now I'm going to get a hand that is not a foot, not a nose, and not an eye. I'm going to have to find a nose that is not a foot, a hand, or an eye. And I'm going to have to, I'm sorry, find an eye that is not the nose, that is not the hand, that is not the foot, and indeed is not any other of the million parts that make up Robina. You will not find a part called I. Fact. The realization of the emptiness of that I is the realization of emptiness, which is this paradigm shift, sublime, fundamental change in your being, which Buddha says we've never had realized yet.
But if the I is an energy that we cannot perceive?
Who said that? You made that up, Vasilis. Vasily, you made that up just now. You're talking rubbish. I'm not discussing that here. Who says an energy that doesn't exist? Vasily, it does not exist. You keep wanting it to exist. You can't hear that it doesn't there. If it is there, Vasily, if Vasily, there is an individual separate piece called Vasily in there somewhere, you have to point to it. You are assuming it just can't be found because it's secret energy. Because you're so determined there is one.
Ultraviolet light.
Oh, Jesus God.
You cannot
Such a stubborn man. Vasily, calm down and relax. Yes. Vasily, I'm not talking about something that exists that you can't see. I'm talking about something that doesn't exist. But every time you hear this, which is exactly like everybody else, you're so convinced it is there, you just can't hear that it's not there. That's okay. You're allowed to do this. But be logical. No, you're not. You're making a statement. I am telling you, Buddha's saying, you will not find. I just did the example, but you don't want to sit with it. You rush ahead. Do this analysis. It will be enough to blow your mind if you did it properly. I repeat the point. Do you agree with this analysis here?
Of course. There's no question about it. Well,
then good. Then the same analysis. Vasilis has a hand, a nose, and a foot. So how many phenomena did we mention there? Vasilis, would you kindly answer my questions and do this debate the way I'm running it to help you get to the conclusion? Right. You can do whatever you like afterwards. So let's do the analysis. How many phenomena did I mention there?
4.
Name the phenomena.
Table, teacup, glass,
and Vasily. I mean, yourself. I'm talking to you now. I'm talking about you. So how do you refer to yourself? Vasilis or Vasily? How do you speak to yourself? What do you say it yourself? I need to know.
Vasily.
Thank you. So now there are 4 phenomena. So if there are 4 phenomena, Vasily, the ordinary conventional, like we did here, you have to point, please, you've got to follow the thinking, otherwise you're just rushing ahead, which means it just doesn't work. You don't have to do it, then be quiet. We can see your hand, can't we?
Yeah.
And we know it's not a nose, don't we? Mm-hmm. And we know it's not a foot. And then we can see the nose, and we can see it's not a hand or a foot or an eye. And we can see the hand and know it's not a nose or a foot or an eye. But now you have to, we can put your nose there, then put your hand there, we put your foot there. There's 3 pieces we can see. Now I want you to point out the piece called Vasily.
The observer.
Please, no, you're just being clever. Listen, 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 listen. Point it out. Pick it out and put it on the ground, like with your toe and your hand, your foot. Vasily, point out the piece that's called I, listen carefully, that isn't your mind, that isn't intelligence, that isn't all the millions of thoughts, that isn't all your millions of pieces of the body. Can you please point out that one?
Can you point me the mind?
Oh my God. You're so stubborn. Well, I'll leave you alone. You go to your own trip. Any questions, anybody? Unless you do this, you will never go anywhere. You're just being clever, darling, and I love you. But you're just being clever. Can you point? Okay. Can you point out a piece of Vasily that isn't the hand? Can you point out a piece called Vasily that isn't the nose? That's the sweetie. They listen to this for 30 years and study it and then purify and then meditate for another 30. So please give it a bit of space and try and hear it.
I go with that. Huh? I go with that. If you do it on experiential days, you might reach that point. But if you do it on intellectual days,
you start with
there's always a question.
No, there's not. That's nonsense.
Consciousness, where is consciousness?
Oh, that's not the point. We're not discussing consciousness, we're discussing...
But can you point it?
Vasily, it's not the discussion. The discussion is the phenomenon called Vasily.
This is
okay, never give mind.
Approach.
No, darling, it's nothing to do with it. It's not the issue. No, darling, not in this issue here. It's not the issue here, sweetheart. It isn't the issue here. We're taking a phenomenon called Vasily, and we're trying to see where it is. That's all. That's the discussion here. So stick with that one. Stick with that one, darling. Then you can do this. Okay. Then you can do the same discussion with anything you point to, including consciousness. Be no difference. Be exactly the same discussion. Yes, please.
I wanted to ask, what do you say about sometimes we suffer, people can suffer from things that they don't exist. I mean,
like, tell me an example.
Yes, it's a little bit. Sometimes people that have lost their leg.
Yes.
They can suffer excruciating pain from the leg.
I know. I don't understand that. I don't know. I have no idea about that. I don't know. That I don't know. I know the pain of losing your husband. That one. I mean, not my husband. I didn't have one. But that pain I can imagine. But the leg, I'm not so sure. I don't know, darling. I don't understand that one. I mean, I can think about it. It's interesting, isn't it? Though it is very interesting, isn't it?
It is.
I know. It is very interesting. I know. It's very fascinating. Any other questions, people? Yes.
I'll try not to play too clever, but it's really bothering me.
Go, darling.
So I can point out my leg, my nose, my...
you can.
I can chop them out.
Yes.
And I will not find this small part of a meat inside, but who is I who pointed? But who is I who pointed?
It's the same question as him. Exactly. The same question as Vasily. There's an assumption that there is a person running the show. There's an assumption that there isn't a meat that runs the show. But Buddha's saying, one way I like to say it is he's saying, you don't need one.
I agree.
Oh, good, I'm very happy.
I take it for granted that there is nobody who runs the show.
So why do you ask where it is?
Who is the one?
But you just asked the question.
But who is the one who points?
I'm just saying to you, there isn't. So let's look at this. So, okay, so then you have a body and you have a mind. Yeah? Buddha would say you have these two.
Okay.
So, if we are looking at, let's say when I talked about the action yesterday, were you here when I said I'm holding a cup?
Yes.
I'm holding a teapot. Well, we can look into the parts of the body holding the pot, can't we?
Yes.
But we all know the real boss is the mind, isn't it?
Yes.
The thought I will hold and all the bits and pieces of the mind. It's the same here, darling. It's just the same here. All your parts of your mind, called intention, attention, vigilance, decision, concentration, all the bits of your mind are all working together beautifully to think things, to point things out. We keep, and you keep asking, and we all do, it's natural, because we've been believing this for eons, Buddha says, that somehow there's an I running the show, thinking the thoughts, holding the pot, making the decision. Buddha says you don't need that piece, because the parts do beautifully on their own.
It's beautiful, and I understand it, and then it's coming again to me.
I
Who is
know,
the one who understands
exactly.
it?
Let's stop asking that question, maybe. Just keep saying that's the wrong question.
Yeah.
I understand your point, completely. Completely, I understand, we all do it. Have been doing it for eons, Buddha says.
Can we find an analogy, let's say,
For what?
for this?
No.
The eye that doesn't exist. It's something, let's say, in some other level.
No,
But if you put it in
No,
an analogy,
no,
then you
because
accept
the-
that exists.
What's that? What's the
Then
other?
if you can make up an analogy, then you give it substance. Then you,
No, now
you
you're
accept
being,
that exists.
now you're being nihilistic. You just,
No, if you
now you are just throwing the baby out with the bathwater and being nihilistic. That's the wrong answer again. Sorry, Vasily. No, you don't need an analogy. You've got to keep looking at this one. It's just because it's so hang on a second. Philida. Yeah, that's right. For so many eons, this is how we talked. So, okay, the way they say it is like this. Conventionally speaking, it's not a wrong statement to say, I'm holding the teapot. Conventionally, that's true, but Buddha says this is where it's all like smoke and mirrors or like illusion. As soon as it's comfortable to say, for Vasily to say, I'm sitting on a cushion, it's not wrong to say that. But the point is, like I said before about the chocolate cake, there is a chocolate cake on that plate, but the chocolate cake my delusions see have exaggerated its status. So the same, I am sitting on a cushion, but immediately delusions exaggerate the status of that and assume there's a real, pointable, solid, self-existent, intrinsic, absolutely definite, frozen in space me that when you start to search for it can be found. But no. You search. And this is my point. It doesn't take long. If we say my table has a cup, a pot, and a glass, it's 4 phenomena. It's easy to prove there are 4 phenomena. But we all fight and say, when we say, I have a hand, a nose, and a foot, we fight. And he thinks it's hidden, it's secret, you can't see, it's like ultraviolet, all this shouting, because he's convinced there has to be one. He's frantic, he can't stand the thought that you simply won't find a piece, an individual piece that isn't the toe, isn't the foot, isn't the mind, isn't the nose, isn't the pee-pee, isn't the caca, isn't the millions of other pieces. We are so convinced there is one somehow vaguely there. This is the type of analysis you have to do. You know? It's kind of like ridiculous. Yeah.
Do we may have a scientist here?
What, darling?
We may have a scientist here among us.
Who?
A scientist.
This is being scientific, excuse me. Look at yourself, you're a scientist.
And say, you know what? There is no cup, there is no glass, it's just atoms.
That's another discussion. That is not the discussion here. That's already getting too cosmic.
Okay.
Because we've already, you see, we can't begin to discuss anything until we first establish it conventionally.
Okay.
So we have to all agree. Listen. We have to come to an agreement first. That is validly, conventionally a cup. Its label is a cup. Its definition is it holds tea. We prove it holds tea. We make sure there's no other valid cognition that contradicts that. We sign the contract. That is a cup conventionally. So that's what they say. There is a Vasily that does sit on the cushion, that is trying to argue, that thinks there's a self there, but when you start to search for him, you can't find him. That's the tricky bit. That's the infuriating bit. So there is a cup that does hold my tea. It functions. Look. But when you start to search, Buddha says, among the parts, the more you search, you will never ever find an inherent, real, true, solid, independent cup in there somewhere. All you will find is the parts. So on the one side, there is a cup that does exist, but ultimately there is not a fraction, millimetre of a billionth of an atom of a cup there. So it's putting these seeming absolute contradictions together because they're not contradictory. And the final middle way, as they say it, is when these two are simultaneous in our mind. When we finally have the realization that there is no cup from its own side, but there is a cup. There is no eye from its own side, but there is an eye. They seem... No, you can't. You be quiet, Vasily, and bloody listen. You're such a clever bugger. I love you. Come on. Be like the others who don't open their mouths. Just shut up. And listen. And meditate on it tonight. And get an experience of it. And dream about it. And then it'll come and it'll blow your mind. I don't want you to talk. No. No is the answer. No. Well, you can talk, but not to me. I'm not going to listen. Are we communicating a bit? These are the words for it. These are the words. But to put meat on these bones takes a lot of work, a lot of purification, a lot of meditation, a lot of study, a lot of practice. Years and years and years and years.
Can I talk?
You are allowed to talk.
Thank you very much.
Can I?
So, can maybe this big analogy...
Go on.
Can maybe this big analogy that I'm looking for, like, the same way...
Sweetheart, can you just... No, I don't want you to use an analogy. Stop being fancy. Just listen. No, shh. No, please. You're being kind of... He's being stubborn and kind of concrete and anal. You're being kind of all creative and smoky, creating la-di-da. Listen, just listen to the words. Take them seriously. Just listen to the words. Now, you're getting like him. I'm going to tell you to be shut up as well. Just listen to the words and try and meditate on it and get it. But it takes, like I said, a long time. This is the end result. This takes years. Even to be able to say the words accurately takes a long time. Even theoretically, even intellectually, it takes time. Would anybody else like to ask a question? Or make a statement? Or argue? Yes, darling. Go.
I have an analogy that I have.
About what? What's the analogy?
It's about a boat.
What? And what's this going to prove?
About no eye.
Okay, good. What's the analogy? Let's hear it.
Okay, so there is a boat and it's a new boat. And during the years, so parts are broken and you have to change them. You have to change the engine and then the wood and everything. And finally, after 10 or 20 years, there is nothing
of the original boat.
From the
beginning.
The original boat.
Yeah, from the original boat.
But
and it's still the same boat. It has the name. Even if you change the name, it's still for you the same boat.
That's helpful to understand impermanence, but not emptiness, I would think. It's helpful. Yes, it's good. It's helpful. Yes, it's not unhelpful, I would agree. But it's not unhelpful. But it's not getting to the point. It's not this particular point I'm making here. But it's okay. Very nice. Thank you. Go. What do you want to say now? What do you want to say? Any more?
Am I allowed to say that?
It's a question of what you're saying. Come on, please.
I was trying to say that maybe Vasilis can just the analogy if we put it in a different level.
What, darling?
Like we conventionally all together agree that this is a cup. Okay, yes, perfectly. But if we see it in a point of view, let's say from physics or chemistry... But
see, that's not the... Sweetheart, that's correct. Buddha agrees with that it's made of atoms. But that's no big deal. That's not the point here at all. You're missing the point. No, because the Buddhist view is once you've established conventionally that it is a cup, then it is a cup. Relax. Don't get all cosmic. Because emptiness is not saying it's made of atoms. That's got nothing to do with this discussion. That's not this discussion. It's a very interesting discussion, but it's not this discussion. It's not the point I'm discussing. Okay? But it's very nice. Very nice analogy. Nothing wrong.
Is it a very Western? Because
the very what?
Western way of thinking, because from ancient Greece you go to Plato trying to find the I. You go to Descartes, I think, therefore I
Sure,
am.
Plato said about, they talked about souls, those guys, didn't they?
Well, they started with the I, who am I? They started with the question,
so what
who
did they come
am
up
I?
with?
And he also questioned the shadow, what's reality? Is the shadow reality in a cave? Or am I the reality? You know, they questioned a lot of things.
Okay, that's right, exactly, of course, that's right.
Refusing to say that this is not a car. This is not. The only way I can relate to anything is I think, therefore I am. And it's a very, it's different philosophers that have been questioning from ancient Greece. Right. Is it a very Western thing that we are so attached to this I, and all over thousands of years now there being debates or questions about it, or is it the whole planet? Is like
no, Buddha would say it's not just the West. He says this is samsara. This is the view of all living beings since beginning was time. This view the Buddha has of the mind, he says this applies to animals, to hell beings, to spirits, to beings of 1 billion years ago. And this is what he means by being in samsara, having these different... There can be degrees of how we grasp at the I, of course. There are degrees of it. But this assumption of an independent, separate I is fundamental. And this is where even he would argue with the Hindu findings, which seem so similar. You know, the highest great yogis in the Hindu view would have very similar words about emptiness, but still, the Buddha would argue, they're still asserting that there is something you can find in there, which they call Atman, that can be pointed to, that bears the label I, and the Buddha says, no, there isn't. Which sounds simple words to say. So even from there he diverges, you know. So it's the nature of all beings to have this. And until we've, as he would call it, until we've seen nakedly, clearly at a subtle level of mind, the absence or the emptiness of that inherent I, and they're the words for it. Until then, we will never, ever, 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 ever stop suffering and stop being reborn. That's what he says.
Can I ask now?
Yes, please, Vasily, yes. What's the question?
The question is that if we accept that there is no any concrete I.
There's no inherent I is the right word for it. No intrinsic I. No inherent independent I.
So, whose intention is to
Again,
change?
your same question. Your same question every time.
I'm trying to find from another angle
but
the
Vasily,
answer.
But you just asked for an I. You're asking who is doing it.
I'm asking.
Yeah.
Who's want to change this I which is attached?
It's your same question as before.
Who is the one?
The same question as before. The same question as before.
Who?
The same question as before. There is no who. There is the thought, I want to do that. That's what does it. There's the thought, I will hold the cup. The
Which
thought.
Independent thought.
No, not independent at all. No. We take the person called Vasilis. And Vasilis is made up of body and mind. And all the pieces called body and mind work beautifully to first intend, I will hold the pot, and then pick up the pot. All the parts, hear the words, the parts of Vasilis are all working beautifully to have the experience of Vasilis holding the pot. So when you ask who decides to hold the pot, my answer is there is no who, but there is the thought, I will hold the pot. There is the thought, I will not drop the pot. There is the hand holding the pot. There is the vigilance, checking up that you don't forget that you're holding the pot. There is no I that runs it. There are the pieces working together. You don't need an I to do it.
So
that's the answer.
So the thoughts runs the soul.
That's right. Exactly.
So if the thoughts are running the soul,
that's right.
We are not responsible for our thoughts.
Who's we? Who's I?
Nobody.
No, you're being
it's a thoughts problem. It's not my problem.
Now you're being nihilistic.
Huh?
Now that's a nihilistic statement which assumes there's no I altogether. You just threw the baby out with the bathwater. Yeah. It's more nuanced than that. And that's the point I'm making. Well done. You're doing great, Vasily. You'll be a good student when you study Buddhism. I'm not being patronizing. Yes, I mean.
Where does this soul is?
In your body.
My body
your thoughts in there, your mind's in there.
Souls.
Your mind's in your body. It's not over here. It's not in the cushion.
It's not
be in trouble.
Somewhere around.
No, it's in your body, darling. Your mind is conjoined with your body. When you're dead, your mind will be gone. Your mind is in your body. Very clear. No problem. Not mysterious.
It's not floating, so it's just in determine.
Okay. It's an interesting topic, isn't it? You've got to see it.
Yeah.
It's an interesting topic.
Right.
And all Buddha is saying is the belief, utter, intrinsic, primordial, beginningless conviction in the status of a real, pointable, independent I, independent of the parts, independent of causes, independent of the mind labelling I, is the source of all suffering, all samsara, since beginningless time. So when you hear that, it's kind of insane. But this is what he's saying. So obviously the fact that we hear that sounds ridiculous proves we don't think it, you know. So it's a question of investigating this. And all the teachings we've been discussing until now lead us to this one. Lead us to this one.
And how it can help us.
To lessen suffering, that's my point. That's the point. Okay, to lessen suffering and to eventually stop it altogether. So again, just giving the words. In this high, we talked about the mind repeatedly the last 3 days. The negative states of mind, we repeatedly talked about those. We know them all backwards. Anger, fear, jealousy, depression, low self-esteem, we know them. All I'm saying is they are like the voices, the main voices of this ego grasping, which is the term that's used to refer to the belief in our mind, deep in our bones, in this little intrinsic I. So as long as that belief is there, its main voice is attachment to get what that I wants, and then anger when it doesn't, and all this hierarchy. So when you've cut the grasping at this I, which is the root delusion, when you see reality, then attachment and anger fall away. There's nothing left. There's nothing to be attached to. There's nothing to be angry about. Your mind is blissful. You're full of love and compassion, and you have no longer any fear, no longer any anxiety, no longer any of those delusions. Those delusions have now finished. You are now blissful, clear, loving, compassionate. When you've perfected all this, and your mind is as vast as space, and you have infinite compassion, infinite wisdom, and can benefit others perfectly. That's the consequence of this. Yes.
It seems, because I was once with a very small, my daughter, very small, as soon as she was born, it seems that this ego grasping is inherent before even we're born, because I was starting my teachings with Buddhism and had this little child who was full on, me, I. So it comes right away.
That's right. Of course. Since beginningless time.
And it's like we're enhancing it as soon as they're born by laying on all their personality.
No, it's true. Yes.
So
No, it's true.
That's true. Just the whole of existence is exasperating and enhancing this.
That's how the Buddha would say. Definitely, that's how Buddha would say. Yeah.
The little children, you would think, would be sort of perhaps in the first stages not carrying this heavy burden.
No, because, the little child was... I always point out, Hitler was a baby once. Oh, little Adolf, she said, So innocent, look at him. But every imprint of all Hitler's tendencies was there waiting to ripen. He brought them with him, he had trained well. Couldn't wait to get out of there and become big Adolf.
So are there some Rinpoches or some enlightened beings who are born without this heavy...
Of course, that's the point. Darling, of course, that's the whole point, And more and more these days, I'll tell you some nice stories, more and more these days, they are saying there are beings who are being born, kids who are born, children, girls and boys, who are, reincarnated holy beings from the past who've chosen to be reborn. There's a little girl in Scotland, for example, who from the time, I'm just telling you stories. You don't have to believe what I'm telling you, okay? I'm just telling you stories, telling you things I know from what I've heard, based on this, Buddhist world that I live in. So the little girl in Scotland, for example, she's, from the moment, her father said, from the moment, he was a student of my lamas in Kathmandu. So from the moment she saw this photo of this lama, she would announce, oh, that's me, she'd say. She's always very intelligent, very calm, very peaceful little girl, very, and so she got older and older, she always talk about this. And then eventually he went to see Lama Zopa and other lamas, and they didn't say much, but eventually was kind of interesting actually, because eventually this other Lama, this one who she said she was the reincarnation of, in our monastery in Kathmandu, they found this little boy, because they have this whole method in Tibet. Tibetan Buddhism has this method of searching, when a Lama dies, a Lama being a person who can go through this death process like we're talking about, who's got these realizations of emptiness, who's got these amazing levels of compassion, who has complete control over the process and can choose. They don't need from their side to be reborn. Once you've realized emptiness and perfected it, you don't need to be born. You've cut the motor. You're finished. But they choose to be reborn out of their immense compassion, you know, because they want to benefit others. And so these lamas, okay, there's a system in Tibet, it's been going for 1,000 years, where they have this method of recognizing reincarnated lamas. The whole system, you know. So this little girl, they checked up, they do all their divinations, the lamas check up, and then what happened was another little boy was formally recognized, one of the nephews or something of one of the monks. And so he was formally recognized as the reincarnation. Then they have these enthronements, and he's known as Rinpoche, which means precious one. They're given this title, you know. And so this little girl's also hanging around. She's saying that she is him. There's no problem because he can manifest in many bodies simultaneously. These lamas can. So eventually, some of the monks at Kopan were a bit sort of like this blonde, blue-eyed girl. Who does she think she is, you know? And sort of like Lama Zopa joked one time and said, oh, it's a bit difficult for them to think of a little girl being a girl too, plus blue-eyed and blonde, being the reincarnation of their Lama, you know, a little bit like that. And so at one point some monks were criticising. And so they asked this one old Lama at Kopan, who was very skilled at this type of kind of divination system they have, you know. They can do their meditations and they can see things and they'll tell you. And they trust these people a lot. So they asked the abbot at Kopan asked this old Lama to do a divination, who is this girl? And he came out of he said, she is, in fact, also Geshe Lama Kongtrul. So then some of the monks had to apologise to the father, you know, because they thought he was pushing his little blonde daughter. It's kind of funny, in a way. But so there's many children like this. She's now about 14, lives in Glasgow. There's a little girl in Israel that I know, whose parents are very devoted to some lamas in Kathmandu.
So what happens to this little girl? Does she come to start?
Well, as she gets older, she will, you know, she's in charge of her life. She knows what she's doing. She knows who she is. She'll get educated. Many of them get sent to the monasteries quite young and get educated in the same system, and they become lamas. There's many of those. There's always a generation of those. There's many, many. But she'll eventually, assuming, you know, she'll take the role of being a teacher, that kind of thing. My teacher, Lama Yeshe, he passed away in 1984, and then he was recognised about 12 months later as this little Spanish boy. He's now about 30. But a lot of these young reincarnations, actually, they're not doing the typical Tibetan thing. They stop being monks, they hang out with the girls, they become hippies, they play music, they become rappers. So this Lama, he's said to be a Lama, he's said to be the reincarnation of my Lama. Dalai Lama recognised him. He's now 30. He's hanging out, you know. I don't know what he's going to do. It's interesting. So many of them like this, young kids. There's one other one who stopped being a monk. He became he's doing rap and everything. They're said to be formally recognised as these lamas, right?
Will they become monks again?
Well, not necessarily, but they'll certainly become teachers. So if they are who they are, holy beings, doesn't matter what form they take, they're going to be. The only reason they've got bodies is to help others. That's the only reason they function, the only reason they exist. So there's so many of these. There's a little girl in Israel, actually, who's, I don't know, she hasn't been formally recognised, but you can see she's kind of really unusual, very special. And the Lama's treated with great respect, you know. There's many. There's a little boy, a friend of mine. Some of them are really wild. And many are called autistic. It's a bit scary, actually. Because they don't have the usual ego. They don't have the usual drama of an ordinary kid who gets jealous and needy and crying and manipulating, you know. They're their own people. And this little boy I know, one of them, he's a son of a friend of mine. And he's fierce, incredible intelligence, fierce energy. I mean, really strong. He's exhausting to be his mother, I'm sure. And so I remember, you know, she was really worried about him. He doesn't like food. He has no interest in any kind of food. He's fit and healthy. And so, some educators said he was autistic. And she was really worried about him, you know. And I said, well, listen, please, Karina, go and just send a photo of him and show his symptoms to these Tibetan doctors. There's a whole generation of these amazing, this is part of their system in Tibet, these Tibetan doctors who work like the Chinese with their subtler energies, who are also holy lamas, who are clairvoyant, who have very special powers, who are very compassionate. And there's this one lama who's one of the Dalai Lama's doctors. I really trust him, you know. I said, just show him the photo and ask him. He just looked at the photo and he saw the symptoms. He said to Karina, yes, he said, that's how yogis behave. Meaning he's a past meditator, you know. But he's got this kind of enormous intelligence and wisdom. He doesn't mind what people think. He's a huge, outrageous behaviour. So Lama Zopa's given him all these practices, which he does. He recites the Heart Sutra. He does these practices. He's a very amazing kid. But it's just kind of interesting because there's so many of these. I mean, this is the world I live in, so you pick up and learn a few are around. It's interesting. I mean, it's interesting. What can I say?
His Holiness the Dalai Lama has sort of suggested that he might reincarnate inside Western.
Well, he said several things. Yeah, we'll see what happens, isn't it? Sure. Yes, he has said. That's right, exactly. So the Chinese can't get him, but they'll create their own. Don't worry about it. So what else, people? Any questions? What is it? Tea break already? No, not quite yet.
I'd like to ask.
Yes, Pam.
You mentioned something before that, for some reason, struck a little bell in my mind. You were saying to Vasily that when the body dies, the mind leaves the body.
Yes, sure.
Not me.
Oh,
I mean,
sorry.
Go on. Yes, sure. Yes, that's right. Exactly. Then.
And it is this mind that will carry on to the next.
It's the continuity of the consciousness. It's an unbroken river of mental moments, and every single thing you put in the mind now, in just the same way that whatever you put in the mind today will bring results tomorrow, won't it? Well, the same when it leaves the body. Yeah, of course. That's what reincarnation is. That's what karma's about.
Okay, so that is what gets reincarnated.
Yeah. So when Prem dies, like I described the death process this morning, you were there then, right? Yes. Go through this deconstruction process, the 8 stages, your body stages, your eyes, your ears, the elements, then your subtle consciousness, gets all the way to the very subtle consciousness. And this very subtle consciousness, conjoined with the very subtle wind energy, these are indestructibly connected. But it's sort of like, if you like, you could say that's the repository of all the trillions of karmic imprints programmed in that consciousness. It's about the only words I can use, There's nothing you've said or done before that will go astray, unless the seeds have already ripened. So you carry this with you, but already the package you'll become is determined before you stop breathing. So let's say Prem, when he dies, due to his practice, he's going to be reborn as some, Buddhist practitioner in Australia. Well, already it's programmed. And this subtle consciousness, when you, mummy and daddy in Australia have sex, he will run in there and he'll join them, and off he goes, becoming Mary, the new Buddhist in Melbourne or something, carrying all the imprints. And if you're a highly realised being, like these little yogis, they have coping memory. They recall exactly. Lama Zopa Rinpoche, my teacher, Paros teacher.
Excuse me, you're not clairvoyant, are you?
What?
You're not clairvoyant.
No, I'm not clairvoyant.
No, because you just mentioned I'd become a Mary in Australia. I was wondering.
No, no, I'm not clairvoyant. So anyway, our teacher, Lama Zopa, he was a Sherpa in his past life. He was said to be a Sherpa, up in the mountains in Nepal. So he was said to be this reincarnation of this, he is this reincarnation of this Nyingma yogi, a lay yogi, who was a great meditator in secret, who spent, like a lot of them, the last 20 years of his life in this sort of cave. And it's called Laudo, and it means radishes, I think. So the radishes were stored there, and he pulled out the radishes and moved in, and he lived there for the last 20 years of his life, doing all these meditations, accessing his subtle mind, doing all the purification, blah, 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 then dies with complete control. And which means they can choose their rebirth. They know what they're doing. They're in charge of the process, He'd already made his decision in advance what womb he'd get born in. So he dies, and he zaps into one of these women's womb down the hill, who used to be one of his, benefactors, serving him dinner and everything. So then he's a little boy, Zopa, and the sister said from the time he could crawl, the moment his mother turned her back, little Zopa's crawling up the mountain to where they know the cave is, So the indication is, this is what these little yogis, I remember one Lama listening to him, he said when he was a tiny baby, he was so frustrated. He knew who he was. He was so frustrated because he couldn't do anything, this stupid baby body, Because they have this clear awareness of who they are because they haven't lost the plot. They've chosen their new rebirth. They don't lose the plot, which we do. We've got to start all over again. Not quite. So anyway, little Zopa, every time the mother turned him back, and then as he got older, he'd start walking up the hill. Come home, she'd say. No, he'd say, that is my home. Then, whenever he's playing games, he'd always play the role of a Lama, and he'd make little mud pie bells and mud pie things, and he'd ring his bells and do pujas, and he'd announce all his benefactors were coming to the puja, and he'd list all the people from his past life. This is typical behaviour, right? So anyway, his mummy figures, well, you better check up with the Lamas. They have this way of divinations the Lamas have. So they put it to the Lamas, and they do all their trip, and they say, yes, it does seem like he's the reincarnation of the Laudo Lama. So then he starts being, he's put into a monastery and everything. And then Actually, interesting story about emptiness. This is an interesting story. So let's assume he is who he is. Let's assume my Lama Zopa is the reincarnation of this yogi. Let's assume he has realizations and can control his rebirth. Let's assume he does realize emptiness and has bodhicitta, which is the way they talk. But this interesting story, when he was 8, he told this story a few years ago. He was up in the mountain with his manager. They're very organised, these people. They get handed over from the family to the monastery and they have a manager. It's funny, isn't it? These little reincarnated boys. Girls too now. So anyway, he was up there and there was this big river. And he saw on the other side of the river this kind of pale-faced, straw-coloured hair people with pale eyes. Well, he meant white people. He's never seen white people before, you know. So he really wanted to meet them. Obviously some, you know, trekkers. This is back in 1952 or something. And so he wants to go meet them. His manager didn't want him to go because the bridge is very rickety. But he goes with his bowl of potatoes to give a gift. But he falls in the river with his bowl of potatoes, you know. So, of course, they don't teach him swimming up there. But the interesting point, the way he told the story is this. He said, to himself when he's a little boy, drowning. He said, the head, he said. The head, meaning his own head, was coming up to the surface, you know, for air. And he could see his manager running on the bank, freaking out. Then he said, the thought occurred to me. The person known as the Laudo Lama is about to die. And then he said, I didn't know anything about emptiness, which means in that life he hadn't heard it. I didn't know anything about emptiness, but there was no fear. That's the sign he has realised emptiness. Even the way he said the head. You know, if Vasilis shouts at me when I'm his girlfriend, I'll say, you insulted me, you know. If you nearly fall off the mountain, you say, I nearly fell off the mountain. Well, excuse me, first of all, don't be stupid. Yeah, I did not. Your body nearly fell off the mountain. So you don't go, oh, the body nearly fell down the mountain. Well, he said the head. He didn't say, I came up for air. He said the head. So that means you talk conventionally, the person, but he said, not I am about to drown, but this is the way they talk when you're practicing working on your mind, which is really helpful. The person known as the Laudo Lama. So technically, you are not Vasilis. You are the person known as Vasilis. But you'd be kind of stupid if you start saying, oh, I'm the person known as Robina. Just shut up and talk normal, okay? But you don't buy into it. And he was 8, okay? So, and there was no fear. And that's what they say, the final consequence of ridding the mind of this neurosis and ridding the mind of all the other neuroses. Your mind is blissful, your mind is clear, you don't get disturbed, you don't freak out, you don't have panic attacks, you don't have any fear. Now this, psychologically, in our world, is considered mental illness to say even that's possible. Because we don't know anyone because our view of the world is based upon the typical view of ego, you know. So this is what they're saying. So that means, you see, then we'd think, well, that means he didn't have any instinct for survival. That means, why didn't he sink to the bottom of the river and go, oh, well, I'm drowning, so what? No, he still came up for air. He couldn't swim, so he's coming up for air. But the point is, his mind wasn't freaked out. He could see crystal clear what was going on. He did what he did to survive. And in fact, he was saved, obviously. He's still alive. But the mind doesn't get disturbed. This is hard for us to imagine. Because we live in disturbance to one degree or another all day until we die. Anxiety, worries, fears, jealousies, depression, you know. This literally has gone when you've realised emptiness and perfected the realisation with much meditation. Then your mind is radiant, blissful, vast, clear. You can still be powerful. Like this little boy, it seems like he is a great yogi, was a great yogi, Karina's son, it would seem. But still, he doesn't walk around like a little saint. Depends on their nature. This little girl does. She's always been peaceful. If she is the reincarnation of this Lama, he was a holy being. He meditated in the mountains for 25 years, naked, with no food, no sleep, and no water, and no clothes. Because these great yogis don't need sleep, water, food, or clothes, because they're able to retain their own heat. They stay in meditation for months, if not years, doing their trip, you know. Completely gone beyond samsara. So if she is the reincarnation of him, she's a pretty amazing being. So her nature is very peaceful. This other boy, his nature is wild, you know. So we've all got different natures. You don't just turn to some little clone of a little saint, you know.
The nature is referring to the seeds, the many seeds that you mentioned the other day.
Huh?
How we have many seeds inside.
No, not so much that. More, when I say nature, you can see among humans, We're all different styles, aren't we? Some are sweet, some are kind, some are tall, some are skinny, some are soft, some are loud. All got different styles, which means we've all got different states of mind. And so this is where we're talking in the Vajrayana. You can learn to utilise all of that energy to become good. You know, like I was saying before, to utilise attachment for something good. And this is why I know for myself from the beginning. You can see I'm a speedy person, volatile, you know, look, you can see, it's clear. This is a little girl, this is my nature. So when I became a Buddhist and I started to hear about mindful, meditate, I thought, bugger mindful. I'm not just to meditate, thank you very much. I don't want to become slow, mindful, kind of like that. That's what I want to bubble up and burst. But I did want to look at my mind, that's clear. So for me always was trying to be authentic. We're all different packages, you know. When people see the Dalai Lama, they're amazed. He talks so fast, he's speedy, he's powerful, you know. He's not a little kind of cute, little kind of soft, well, we have a fantasy of a mindful, peaceful person. Do you understand what I'm saying? We've all got different shapes and sizes and natures, and we've got to learn to know what our nature is. And then in the Vajrayana teachings, there are all these different practices, these different Buddhas that are manifestation of those different kinds. There are some peaceful, some wrathful, some male, some female, and they're just psychological characteristics that one uses to become a good version of yourself, basically. You know, because in Vajrayana, all the qualities can be enhanced and transformed and used, you know.
Oh. Could a woman traditionally become a lama?
Of course, lama is no sex. A lama is a word of respect we use for our spiritual teacher. That's all.
I mean, in the past also.
Have there been some? Have there been some, you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
In Tibet it was pretty patriarchal. There were some, not many. But these days there are more and more. Of course, yes, of course.
I think I found a way to express emptiness in English.
Oh, he's going to find an analogy, is he? Good. In English. Okay, good. Well done, Prem. Let's hear it.
No, it's not an analogy.
Good. Okay, what is it?
For instance, it's tea time now, and the way I would express it is being perceived that this body has a craving for coffee.
Then?
There's no I there.
No, that's not. Well, I wouldn't disagree with that, but that's okay. You're allowed to say that. No. Your body's not craving for coffee, your attachment is. So attachment is your mind. It's not the I. So, okay, let's do another thing. I think this will help answer Vasilis's point, and this is even your point. Listen to this. So we take a phenomenon, we take any phenomenon, and then we start to analyse to find the inherent phenomenon in that phenomenon. So we've been using the example of the I, the person called Vasilis, the person called Amit, the person called Prem, one called Robina, whatever. But the discussion for the cup is the same. So the words would be, there is a cup conventionally. We first established that the flat bottom container that holds tea. That's the definition of what we call cup. We can now begin to discuss how cup exists. So we do all the different analyses, which we haven't gone into much, but we come to the conclusion from all our analysis that therefore there is no inherent cup among the parts. Because you're looking for, just like you're looking for the I among the body and mind, which are the parts of the phenomenon called I, you're also looking for the inherent cup among the parts of the cup. So there is no inherent cup among the parts of the cup.
No.
But then, listen though, then we'll go, okay, better to do the I, okay? So you will find, first we establish, here there are the parts that bear the label Robina. So instinctively, we believe in those parts, not over there, not in his cushion, here among the body and mind, which are the components of Robina. So we believe there is a little mini me in there among those parts. So we do the incredible searching at the subtlest level of our mind for many years, based upon the study and the practice and the purification, and one day we will discover the absence of that I. That's the relative emptiness. But the thing is, as we say the words, there are the parts. You search among the parts, but within those parts you won't find an I. No. So then we'll go, oh, you mean there are parts? Well, there's something. No. Now we search among, for example, the body. We now take the phenomenon called body. Okay. And now we start to search for the inherent body among the parts of the body.
We won't find it.
Shut up, Prem. That's,
Yes.
that's right. But don't be so eager.
No.
Listen carefully. Don't be like him. He's listening now, look. So we look among the parts of the body for the inherent body in there. We're convinced there's a little body in there that is a part among the parts of the body. You will not find an inherent body among the parts of the body. Oh, you mean there are parts of the body? No. You take the knee and you will search among the parts of the knee. You will not find a knee among the parts. There is no knee among those parts. Oh, you mean there are parts? No. Now you search in the cartilage. What is cartilage? Cartilage is the label we impute on the parts of the cartilage. But we believe there's a real inherent cartilage there. No, you keep searching among the parts of the cartilage, you will not find any cartilage. And you do this in every phenomenon in the trillions of universes. You will come up with the parts, you will have a name imputed by the mind on those parts, but we're convinced there's that in those. And you keep doing this type of analysis. So they literally say it's like an illusion. As we say in the West, it's smoke and mirrors. There's the appearance of a cartilage, but you can't find a cartilage. There's the appearance of a body, but you can't find an innate, inherent body. There's an appearance of an eye, but you can't find an inherent eye. So as Lama Zopa says, when you realise this, when you realise the absolute emptiness of even an atom of Robina within here, it is as if there is no Robina, but there is a Robina. But what does exist is so subtle, it's as if there is no Robina. It is as if Robina is an illusion. It's kind of sound cute, but it's said to be profoundly meaningful. And when we've realised this, not just know the words is a good step, this is what Lama Zopa's experience. There is no fear. The mind is blissful. The mind is also clairvoyant and all the other things, because you remove the delusions and neuroses when you're perfected it, you know. This is the wisdom teachings. All the wisdom teachings in Buddhism lead to this one. This is just one way of analysing. There's many approaches, which they do in the monasteries for 30 years, you know, in the debate yards and their meditation. Yeah.
So in everyday life, are there ways, like the way we refer to ourselves, or the way we talk to ourselves, or anybody, that can really help us?
Yeah.
To, let's say, weaken this grasping from others.
Yeah, exactly. All these things that I'm talking about. But the good time to do it is, let's say, when, you know, my boyfriend insults me, and this I is shouting loud, the feeling of this big, vivid, real, painful, sore, hurt, wounded I in there is absolute certain, isn't it? So then just to talk to yourself, even though it doesn't feel, you talk to yourself and you analyse using these discussions. Even you're not convinced at the beginning. Of course we're not convinced. It takes years to be convinced. Because the belief in the I is so strong. You know, even the one that sounds so funny, I nearly fell off the mountain. Well, how silly, this Pavanka Rinpoche says. Your body nearly fell off the mountain. Your mind can't fall off the mountain. Your body can, and there's no I to fall off the mountain. But this is how we talk. You insulted you know, if you say my nose is ugly, you insulted me, I'll say. No, you didn't. You insulted my nose. I mean, it sounds so stupid to us. Because we assume, they say, if there is an I, an independent I, an inherent I, it's either separate from the parts, or it's oneness with the parts. There's only these two options. So we do this type of analysis, and they do this in meditation for years, for the penny to drop. But it's tea time. I'm running out of voice. Maybe we need a movie night, but it's 7 o'clock.
So the bodies will go for the dinner.
I've got a feeling my voice is running out, Tiki. I don't know if I'm going to do this. Maybe we should stop early today. Is that okay with people?
Yeah. Would you like a locket?
I would love. So instead of coming back, it's an hour and a half before dinner, isn't it, before we go. I just got a feeling this one. Do you mind?
No.
And I think have a bit of a break anyway. It's been pretty intense. for 4 days. How many more days have we got?
1.
Oh.
I was only coming today and I can't come.
Oh, darling. So, is that okay with everybody?
Yeah.
We'll break.
Yeah, of course.
We'll meet
Relax.
tomorrow.
We'll meet tomorrow for sure. We'll meet tomorrow at 9:30. So we dedicate. I just want to dedicate a little prayer. Just thinking how amazing so far. Full days, amazing. Talking, analysing, thinking, meditating, all these marvellous things. Truly delight. All these imprints in our mind, all these seeds in our mind. How delicious, how fantastic. May we nourish these seeds from this second forward with our virtue, with our goodness, with our wisdom. So never giving up, developing our amazing potential for the sake of suffering sentient beings. Okay? Thank you, darlings. Very much. Thank you, Vasilis, for all your good arguments. Thank you, Ami, for all your good arguments. Thank you, I forget your name, for all your good arguments. Who?
Lambros.
Who? I can't get it. What?
Lambros.
Lambros. Is he a Greek?
L-A-B-R-O-S.
Is he a Greek?
Yes.
So Lambros, well, Lambros.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for your questions, Lambros. Thank you for your questions, Prem.
Thank you.
Thank you.